Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum. I'm here today at Bear Arms in Scottsdale, Arizona, taking a look at some of the cool guns in their reference collection, like this clone of the Danish pattern of G3. This is a Gewehr M75, or a clone thereof. Now it's interesting that Denmark actually didn't adopt the standard G3 first. It adopted the sniper version of the G3 first. That was the Gewehr M66 nearly 10 years before this came into service. Now I have a separate video already on the M66 sniper pattern, so if you want to know about Denmark's first G3, you can check out that video. I'll link to it in the description below. What ultimately happened is, well, in 1950, Denmark had adopted the M1 Garand as the Gewehr M50. I also have a video on these, by the way. They would end up being the last NATO country actively using the M1 as a standard service rifle when, in 1973, they finally decided they ought to replace those M1 Garands with something else. And their justification at the time was, well, the M1 isn't capable of full auto fire. And like, all the cool kids have select fire rifles, so we probably ought to have a select fire rifle too. So they did a bunch of testing, and you want to know what won? The M16 won, actually. The G3 came in number 10, apparently, in Danish testing, which makes one kind of wonder why they adopted the G3. Well, what they ended up actually deciding to do was postpone the decision. Like, we're just going to put it off because that M16 that won, well, it's in 5.56 by 45 millimeter, which isn't a standard NATO cartridge. It wasn't yet. That would come in the mid-70s. And so they put the decision off. And in 1975, they do something that I am not familiar with any other country doing, and that is they decide to lease rifles from the Bundeswehr, from the German military, well, the West German military at the time. Not buy them, but just like rent them. And the justification was largely that, well, we've already got these M66 sniper rifles that are essentially G3s, and Germany has a lot of extra G3s lying around, and we can just like rent them and not have to make a decision. And so they adopt the Gewehr M75, which is essentially a G3A3, by leasing them from Germany. And so what they get are a whole bunch of very early production German, West German Army G3s. So this gun is set up as a clone thereof with a bunch of very early features. And it gets funny. Oh, let me show you. I'll show you the funny part up close. So the funny thing to me is the Danish Home Guard 10 years before this, almost 10 years, gets its G3s with all their own markings and Danish selector settings. So instead of SEF, the M66s are SEA, so that they make sense in Danish. But now, when the standard army is adopting them, they just get German guns with all German markings, surplus essentially from the Bundeswehr. So this one's set up with an early wood stock. Of course, it has those SEF markings. The receiver marks here, unfortunately, are a little dull, and this is reproduction, so it's not an original H&K German receiver, but 362 would be an appropriate date. We have a serial number that matches that date. And we've got the wooden handguard out here, including the little scallop cut. A little hard to see, perhaps, but you've got a scallop cut right there to give you a little better purchase on the charging handle. This has the early full diameter, not gas tube, as some might say, but the cocking handle tube. What they discovered is, especially when the barrel heated up, this front pin, which is connected through to the barrel, could impinge on this tube and cause some deflection on the barrel and hinder accuracy. So on later guns, but pretty early in production, they actually slightly narrowed the end of the cocking handle tube here so that it wouldn't touch on that front pin at all. And otherwise, this is just a totally standard early pattern G3, because that is what the Danish army got. Denmark would keep these rifles. Apparently, this sounds funny to me, but apparently they didn't actually pay for these rifles in full until 1996, when they paid off like the last 70,000 G3s that they had leased from Germany and bought a number of others. Now, over the course of the 20 years that these were being leased and in service, they would be rebuilt, refitted. They had spare parts that they got from a wide variety of other sources. So Danish G3s can include parts that are made in and marked from Sweden, Norway, Turkey, Greece, as well as Germany. At the time they actually paid these off, they also actually replaced them. So it's sort of typical lease-to-own thing. I'm not sure what they paid for these guns. It seems to me this must have been a terrible deal either for the Danes or for the Germans, but I'm not sure who. In 1995, they adopted a new rifle. It was the Diemaco C7, the Colt Canada manufactured M16s and M4 carbines, and those would be the Gewehr M95 and M96, the rifle and the carbine, and they would phase these guys out. They actually kept the M66 Sniper G3s in service for another decade or so. Again, you can see that in the M66 video, but that is where Denmark actually got its G3s. They never had their own made for them. They didn't actually have Danish markings on them. They were just primarily old German service rifles. So pretty interesting story, I think. Big thanks to Bear Arms here in Scottsdale for giving me access to this rifle. And again, cool work by Kilo Guns manufacturing a neat clone of a G3, the sort of custom work that can be pretty hard to find these days. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.